Chapter 3. The Jewel Thief. Startled by Nelda's outcry, Nancy, Bess, and George looked at one another. One thing is certain, Nancy thought. She's terribly disturbed about something. She was forced, however, to recall her earlier suspicion that Nelda might be a spy. In that case, the fact that she was followed would obviously upset her. But then, would she act like this? Nancy's instinct told her to help the sobbing girl. She crossed the room, sat down beside her, and put her arms around Nelda. "Is there anything we can do for you?" she asked. No, the distraught girl replied. Thank you, but my problem is a big secret. I can't tell you." Nancy did not know what to do. After all, Nelda was a stranger to her. She knew nothing of her background. Her problem might indeed be one that she wanted to keep a secret. But then why did she admit that she had been followed? Bess and George crossed the room also and stood in front of Nelda for a couple of seconds. Then George said, "You don't know Nelda, but Nancy is an amateur detective. If your problem is some kind of a mystery, we're sure she can help you solve it, no matter how difficult it is." Nelda looked up. Bess took a handkerchief and wiped the girl's tear-stained face. "Please stop crying," she begged. Suddenly, Nelda smiled. "Oh, you're so wonderful, all of you," she said. "My problem is a secret, a great secret. But I'm sure I can entrust it to you." "Of course you can," George assured her. "Promise?" Nelda asked. When all nodded affirmatively, the girl looked relieved. She showed them the threatening note. "As I told you before," she began her story, "I live in Johannesburg, South Africa. One day I was in a jewelry store to buy a birthday gift. A man stood at one of the counters, looking at diamond bracelets and rings on velvet pads. She paused a moment, then went on. He asked for something on display a little distance away. While the saleswoman was getting it, I saw him put 2 diamond bracelets, several rings in his pocket." "Oh, Nelda!" Bess cried out. "What did you do?" "I was stunned. First I thought my eyes had played a trick on me, because I had watched the whole thing through a reflection in the glass of the display case. But when he hurried out of the store, I knew he had taken the jewelry. I yelled, 'Stop, thief!' and sped after him to the street. But he was too quick for me, and I lost sight of him." "Oh dear," George said. "Did you get the police?" "No. I went back to the store and told the saleswoman, but she didn't believe me and insisted that I had taken the bracelets and rings myself. I tried to convince her I was not a thief, but just then a strange woman walked up. She said she had heard the argument, and when the manager came to see what was going on, she suggested that I be searched. 'Look in her pockets,' she said, and then walked away." Bess interrupted. "And did they search you?" Nelda nodded. "I told them I had nothing to hide. So they checked my pockets, and to my utter astonishment, they pulled out a diamond bracelet." "How dreadful!" Bess exclaimed. Nancy remarked, "What about the woman? Maybe she planted the bracelet in your pocket." "But why would she do that?" Nelda asked, puzzled. "To divert suspicion from the man who stole the jewelry he had snatched when the saleswoman wasn't there," Nancy replied. "What did the thief look like?" "He was of medium height, had black hair combed low over his forehead, a mustache, and a full curly beard." Nancy said, No doubt that woman was an accomplice of the thief and was trying to throw suspicion on you. Nelda looked at Nancy. I can see why you're a detective. I'll bet that's exactly what happened. Please go on with your story, Bess urged. Nelda said that her parents and a lawyer had helped her convince proprietors of the store that she was not a thief, and they had pressed no charges against her. We all thought the matter would end there, the girl explained, but that was not the case. What happened then? George asked. I received a threatening letter. It was not signed, but the writer said I should turn over all the precious jewelry in my family, or I would be harmed. Nelda, that was dreadful, Bess exclaimed. What did you do? My father reported the matter to the police, and they promised to investigate. But we kept getting threats in the mail and over the telephone, and my dad decided it would be best if I left the country for a while. So I applied to an American college and was accepted. I left Johannesburg secretly and flew to Rotterdam, where I stayed with my uncle, the captain of this ship. Nelda paused, then smiled wanly. I've told you the rest already. Of course, I had no idea that you would become involved in this mystery. I'm glad to be, Nancy said. And not only I, but Bess and George, too. They are good amateur detectives also. We'll help you. Oh, how lucky I am to have found such great new friends, Nelda said. Bess looked toward Nancy. Where do you think we should begin? The girl replied, Either the thief Nelda saw in Johannesburg or one of his confederates is obviously on board this ship. Nelda, do you think you could identify the man you watched in the jewelry shop? I'm sure I could, Nelda replied. Then let's hunt for him, Nancy suggested. We'll walk every deck and lounge. Bess reminded her friends that it was almost time for supper. They were to sit at the captain's table and realized they should not be late. As it was the first night, dress was casual and Nancy did not have to worry about changing her clothes. The girls went to the dining room, where they met Captain Detweiler, a tall, burly man whom they liked immediately. After dinner, they spent the rest of the evening looking intently at every man they saw on their trek over the entire ship. At no time did Nelda indicate that she recognized anyone. The girls realized that there was no one who would even remotely fit the description Nelda had given them. Finally, the foursome became weary of searching. Bess giggled and said, We saw men tall and short, men of every size. Some were dark, some were blonde, but none was our prize. George laughed. But you'll get the prize for Best Cornball Poet of the Year. Nancy sighed. If that thief is on board, he must have remained in his cabin. On the other hand, there may be a ring of jewel thieves. I've heard that there are rings in which some members steal, others transport, and even smuggle. A third group sells the stolen property. Your bearded man, Nelda, may still be in Johannesburg. Nelda nodded. Then we have no idea whom we're looking for and what clue we should follow. Right. Nancy was tempted to tell Nelda about the warning she had observed being given with the finger alphabet. She was inclined to think that the unfinished word starting with N-E in the message stood for Nelda, but decided not to say anything yet. The girl from Johannesburg had enough problems. Bess continued her doggerel. We'd better watch our step, especially Nelda, dear. But never, never fear. We'll catch that bad man yet. The other girls laughed. but all had to admit that they had not a single lead to help them do just that. Nelda said, "My uncle invited us up to his quarters. Let's go and tell him everything that has happened." The others agreed, and soon they were seated in the captain's comfortable living room, telling him about the threatening note Nelda had received and their vain search for the man who had written it. Captain Detweiler looked grave. "This is a very serious matter," he said. Nancy now brought him up to date on the story of her missing trunk and the strange one that had been delivered to the girls' cabin. The captain frowned. "You say there's no identification of any kind on this mystery trunk? In that case, I feel I have a right to open it and find out if there are any clues to the owner." "Unless we can find the man I overheard in the corridor," Nancy put in. "He might own the trunk." The captain nodded. "First, I'll talk to all the stewards and porters and see if I can find out who the man is. If I'm not successful, and if he does not come forward on his own, I'll send Lou, the locksmith, to your cabin tomorrow to open the trunk. I might not be able to be there myself, but," he smiled at Nancy, "since you are a detective, you'll find any identification that might be inside." Nancy smiled back. "I'm sure I will. But do you have any idea where my own trunk could be? Mr. Havelock has already called the hold, but they have no record of it." "When I talk to the porters, I'll pursue this also. Perhaps someone put it in the wrong cabin." "Thank you very much," Nancy said. "And now I think we should leave. Good night." Bess and George said good night also, and Nelda kissed her uncle. "Take care, all of you," he said to them. George suggested that before going back to their cabin, they should stroll on the promenade deck. "We might even find the man we're looking for," she added. The others agreed, and they set off. They met a group of girls about their own age and introduced themselves. The newcomers were chatting about their departure and the facilities on the ocean liner. "They have a lovely outdoor pool here," a tall brunette named Sarah Jane Ramsey said. "And there's another one indoors, way at the bottom of the ship. And there are ping-pong tables and shuffleboard," another girl reported. "We'll have a great time during our trip." One of the girls admired Nancy's light blue summer dress. "I'm glad you like it," Nancy replied and laughed. "You might see me in it for the rest of the voyage." She told the girls that she had not received her trunk, but did not mention the mystery trunk that had been sent to her cabin by mistake. The girls immediately offered to lend her clothes, but Nancy thanked them and said she would have enough from her friends. Then they said goodbye to the group and went on. They were halfway around the deck when Bess suddenly cried out, "Look! Look!" A bright object was descending from the sky at lightning speed. "It must be a meteor," Nelda said, excited. "And it's going to land on this ship," George exclaimed. "We'll all be killed." End of chapter 3.